So if I were to show you what your next worksheet looks like, it will look something like this. Okay? And here's the grid. This is what this is in point slope form. What is it? Blank in slope intercept form. What is it? Blank in standard form. What is the ordered pair and what is the slope for this particular equation? Wait. And sometimes I'm going to ask you, well, this is what it is in slope intercept form. How are you going to write it in point slope form? How are you going to write it in standard form? And so on. So it depends on how I give it to you to what you're going to have to find. So the first thing I want you to know how to do is how to switch from point slope. All right, point. Let me spell this correctly. P-O-I-N-T. A point slope into slope intercept. Let's write down that first. Point slope to slope intercept. Let's come up with a quick equation. This will be like number 1, just so you have an idea. It's y minus 4 equals, meant to write 5, parenthesis, x minus 8. If I want this into slope-intercept form, I'm going to follow a few steps just like we did before. And I'll write out the steps over here. Distribute. Second step, move the number next to the y. To the other side of the equal sign. It's basically 2 steps to go from point slope into slope intercept form. So the first step, we need to distribute. The only thing we can distribute is the 5 into the parentheses, which I reminded you this when I taught you distributive property. I said this is like the donut rule. You cannot just give donuts to this half of the classroom. You have to give donuts to both halves of the classroom. Otherwise, it's not fair. Remember that? So the first thing I do when I distribute, 5 has to multiply the x and 5 has to multiply the negative 8. Let's write out what that is. What is 5 times x? And 5 times negative 8. Good. So you have done step 1. Step 1 is distributing. This is not in slope-intercept form. Not yet. The next thing that we have to do is move the number next to the y. Is there a number next to the y? To the other side of the equal sign. So that means instead of subtracting 4, I should, whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Negative 4, positive 4 goes away. Y equals 5x. Now if you're not good with negative 4 plus 40, do it on the calculator. Some of you are not really good with negatives and positives, so use the calculator to figure it out. For me, I know what negative 40 plus 4 is. It is negative 36. And guess what? This is now in slope-intercept form. We went from point slope into slope-intercept. Now what I want to do is I want to do point slope. And I want to know what the point is and the slope is. I want to know what the point is, PT, and I want to know what M is. Wait, there's no work for you to do here. If I want to know what M is, let me write down M equals. Let's look at number 1, and you can tell me if you know what point slope form is, what is M? M is what value? This is your slope. It has to be. It's the number that's in front of your x parentheses every time. Now, what is the point? That means what x value and what y value does this go through? What I want you to remember for point slope form, it's always opposite for your x, opposite for your y. So I need the opposite x and I need the opposite y. When I go and look for my x, I look what's next to my x value and I want the opposite of it. What is the opposite of this minus 8? Should be a positive 8 for your x coordinate. Now I need the opposite of my y value. Look at your y value. What's the opposite of it? So now I have a point and I have the slope from point slope form. The other thing that you will have to do is you are going to have to go from slope-intercept into standard. Let me recenter this. So here's our slope-intercept form. Because we're in slope-intercept form, we're in y equals mx plus b. We don't have to distribute anymore. But we will have to clear any fractions that we have. So I'm going to write here, the first thing we do for doing slope-intercept to standard is to clear fractions by multiplying by the common denominator clear fractions by multiplying by the common denominator. And then the second step is to get x's and y's on the same side and numbers on the other. Get the x's and y's on the same side and numbers on the other. Okay, that's step 2. So let's read step 1. If I have slope-intercept form, I'm going into standard form. Are there any fractions here that I need to get rid of? I don't see any. If there are no fractions, guess what? You've done step 1. You don't have to do step 1 if there's none. So I'm ignoring step 1. Step 2, get x's and y's on the same side of the equal sign. Let me see. Here are my x's on this side and my y's on that side. Let's get them on the same side. What should I do? Ralphie. I agree. And what you get is, can I put those together? Are those like terms? Do these combine? They do not combine. They are not like terms. So I would just write it out. Negative 5x plus y equals negative 36. This answer is completely fine. on any quiz or test, but most of the time, most SATs and SBACs will always have the A as a positive. I'm not saying it's this way all the time, but most of the time, this A value will be positive. So just so you are aware, this is the same thing. I'm going to put or. If I change this sign, becomes a positive 5x. If I change this sign, I have to change all the signs. This makes that negative y. If I change this sign, it's 36. Most of the time on SATs and higher level math questions, they will keep that A value positive. It doesn't have to be, but most of the time that's how they will write it out in standard form. So I will accept either one. I want you, just in case you ever have to switch signs, know that you have to switch every sign if you're switching signs. Okie dokie. So we've talked about how to go from point slope into slope intercept. We've talked about how to go from point slope into a point and a slope, how to go from slope intercept into standard form. But what if you're given something in standard form? And you have to go into slope intercept form. Let me recenter. Bless you. For example, I'll put a 6 in a bubble. (3x minus 5y equals 15). And I need to go into slope-intercept form. What you're going to do here is you're going to solve for y. And really, that's what you do. It's the only, it might be one step, it might be two steps. If I want to get the y by itself, the first thing I'm going to get rid of is this 3x. What's the opposite of a positive 3x is? And the reason this is not multiplying this 5y, it's 3x minus 5y, so I can subtract it from both sides. Negative 5y equals, cannot put those together. Because I cannot put those together, it's negative 3x plus 15. And I almost have the y by itself, but there's a negative 5 next to it. What is the negative 5 doing to the y? So the opposite is, I'm going to divide by negative 5. When you divide by negative 5, on one side of the equal sign, you have to divide everything by negative 5. I want you to divide the negative 3 by negative 5 and the 15 by negative 5. Divide every term by a negative 5. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do to each thing on the other side. And then this is what's going to happen. We have y equals, if it doesn't go in evenly, leave it as a fraction. 3/5 x, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 15 divided by negative 5 is? Now you have something that's in slope-intercept form. If you have slope-intercept form, then you know what m is. So now what you can do is we can take this and go right into, from slope-intercept form, into point-slope form. But you're going to need to be given one other piece of information. And I'm going to put off to the side that this is what you are given. You're given the point 20, 9. There is some point on the line that is 20, 9, the x value and the y value. Well, if you're given this, now you know what the slope is. Now you know what the point is. You should be able to go right into y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I have that formula memorized because I use it all the time. You might need to find yours in your 3.3 notes. Or is it 3.4 notes? Your 3.4 notes. I need to do the opposite of my y value. Here's my y value. What's the opposite of 9? M. Do I know what my m value is? X. I need to do the opposite of my x. What's my x value? What's the opposite of my x value? And now you have your answer in point slope formula.